Hello, more class, and welcome to another episode of Storytime with Mrs. Edwards and the Witches. I think this is about my 50th video during lockdown, so it's very exciting. Everyone's waving at you. Okay, let's start where we left off. I looked round, and I saw a hideous painted and powdered witch's face staring down at me. And the face opened its mouth and yelled triumphantly, "It's here! It's behind the screen! Come and get it!" The witch reached out a gloved hand and grabbed me by the hair, but I twisted free and jumped away. I ran. Oh, how I ran. The sheer terror of it all put wings on my feet. I flew around the outside of the great ballroom, and not one of them had a chance of catching me. As I came level with the doors, I paused and tried to open them, but the big chain was on them and they didn't even rattle. The witches were not bothering to chase me. They simply stood there in small groups watching me, and knowing for certain that there was no way I could escape. Several of them were holding their noses and gloved fingers, and there were cries of, "Pooh! What a stink! We can't stand this much longer!" "Catch it then, you idiots!" screamed the Grand High Witch from up on the platform. "Spread it out in a line across the room and close in on it, and grab it! Corner this filthy little gumboil and seize it and bring it up here to me!" The witches spread out as they were told. They advanced towards me, some from one end, some from the other, and some came down the middle between the rows of empty chairs. They were bound to get me now. They had me cornered. From sheer and absolute terror, I began to scream. "Help!" I screamed, turning my head towards the doors in the hope that somebody outside might hear me. "Help! Help! Help!" "Get it!" shouted the Grand High Witch. "Grab hold of it! Stop it yelling!" They rushed at me then, and about 5 of them grabbed me by the arms and legs and lifted me clear off the ground. I went on screaming, but one of them clapped a gloved hand over my mouth, and that stopped me. "Bring it here!" shouted the Grand High Witch. "Bring the spying little vrum here to me!" I was carried onto the platform with my arms and legs held tight by many hands, and I lay there suspended in the air, facing the ceiling. I saw the Grand High Witch standing over me, grinning at me in the most horrible way. She held up the small blue bottle of mouse maker and she said, "Now for a little medicine. Hold his nose to make him open his mouth." Strong fingers pinched my nose. I kept my mouth closed tight and held my breath. But I couldn't do it for long. My chest was bursting. I opened my mouth to get one big, quick breath of air, and as I did so, the Grand High Witch poured the entire contents of the little bottle down my throat. There you go. Oh, the pain and the fire! It felt as though a kettle full of boiling water had been poured into my mouth. My throat was going up in flames. Then very quickly, the frightful burning sensation, searing, scorching feeling started spreading down into my chest and into my tummy and on into my arms and legs and all over my body. I screamed and screamed, but once again the gloved hand was clapped over my lips. The next thing I felt was my skin beginning to tighten. How else can I describe it? It was literally a tightening and a shrinking of the skin all over my body from the top of my head to the tips of my fingers to the ends of my toes. I felt as though I was a balloon and somebody was twisting the top of the balloon and twisting, and the balloon was getting smaller and smaller, and the skin was getting tighter and tighter, and soon it was going to burst. Then the squeezing began. This time I was inside a suit of iron, and somebody was turning a screw, and with each turn of the screw the iron suit became smaller and smaller, so that I was squeezed like an orange into a pulpy mess, with the juice running out of my sides. After that there came a fierce prickling sensation all over my skin, or what was left of my skin, as though tiny needles were forcing their way out through the surface of the skin from the inside, and this, I realise now, was the growing of the mouse fur. Far away in the distance I heard the voice of the Grand High Witch yelling, 500 doses! This stinky little carbuncle has had 500 doses, and the alarm clock has been smashed, and now we are having instantaneous action. I heard clapping and cheering, and I remember thinking, I am not myself any longer. I have gone clear out of my own skin. I noticed that the floor was only an inch from my nose. I noticed also a pair of little furry front paws resting on the floor. I was able to move those paws. They were mine. At that moment, I realised that I was not a little boy anymore. I was a mouse. "Now for the mouse trap," I heard the Grand High Witch yelling. "I've got it right here, and here's a piece of cheese." But I wasn't going to wait for that. I was off across the platform like a streak of lightning. I was astonished at my own speed. I leapt over Witch's feet right and left, and in no time at all I was down the steps and onto the floor of the ballroom itself, and skittering off among the rows of chairs. What I especially liked was the fact that I made no sound at all as I ran. I was a swift and silent mover, and quite amazingly, the pain had all gone now. I was feeling quite remarkably well. It is not a bad thing, after all, I thought to myself, to be tiny as well as speedy when there is a bunch of dangerous females after your blood. I selected the back leg of a chair and squeezed up against it and kept very still. In the distance, the Grand High Witch was shouting, "Leave the little stinkpot alone! It is not fair bothering about. It is only a mouse now. Somebody else will catch it. Let us get out of here. The meeting is over. I'll lock the doors and shove off to the Sunshine Terrace to have tea with that idiotic manager." Next chapter, Bruno. I peeped round the leg of the chair and watched the hundreds of witches' feet walking out through the doors of the ballroom. When they had all gone and the place was absolutely silent, I began to move cautiously about on the floor. Suddenly I remembered Bruno. He must surely be around here somewhere too. "Bruno!" I called out. I wasn't seriously expecting that I would be able to speak at all now, and that I had become a mouse, so I got the shock of my life when I heard my own voice, my own perfectly normal, rather loud voice coming out from my tiny mouth. It was wonderful. I was thrilled. I tried it again. "Bruno Jenkins, where are you?" I called out. "If you can hear me, give a shout." My voice was exactly the same and just as loud as it had been when I was a boy. "Hey there, Bruno Jenkins," I called. "Where are you?" There was no answer. I pottered about between the seat legs, trying to get used to being so close to the ground. I decided I rather liked it. You are probably wondering why I wasn't depressed at all. I found myself thinking, what's so wonderful about being a little boy anyway? Why is that necessarily any better than being a mouse? I know that mice get hunted and they sometimes get poisoned or caught in traps. But little boys sometimes get killed too. Little boys can be run over by motor cars. Little boys have to go to school. Mice don't. Mice don't have to pass exams. Mice don't have to worry about money. Mice, as far as I can see, have only two enemies, humans and cats. My grandmother isn't human, but I know for certain that she will always love me, whoever I am. And she never, thank goodness, keeps a cat. When mice grow up, they don't ever have to go to war and fight against other mice. Mice, I feel pretty certain, all like each other. People don't. Yes, I told myself, I don't think it is at all a bad thing to be a mouse. I was wandering around the ballroom floor thinking about all this when I spotted another mouse. It was crouching on the floor holding a piece of bread in its front paws and nibbling away at it with great gusto. It had to be Bruno. "Hello, Bruno," I said. He glanced up at me for about 2 seconds, then went right on guzzling. "What have you found?" I asked him. "One of them dropped it," he answered. "It's a fish paste sandwich. Pretty good." He too spoke with a perfectly normal voice. One would have expected that a mouse, if it was going to talk at all, would do so with the smallest and squeakiest voice you could imagine. It was terrifically funny to hear the voice of the rather loud-mouthed Bruno coming out of that tiny mouse's throat. "Listen, Bruno," I said. "Now that we are both mice, I think we ought to start thinking a bit about the future." He stopped eating and stared at me with small black eyes. "What do you mean, we?" he said. "The fact that you're a mouse has nothing to do with me." "But you're a mouse too, Bruno." "Don't be a fool," he said. "I'm not a mouse." "I'm afraid you are, Bruno." "I most certainly am not," he shouted. "Why are you insulting me? I haven't been rude to you. Why do you call me a mouse?" "Don't you know what's happened to you?" I said. "What on earth are you talking about?" Bruno said. "I have to inform you," I said, "that not very long ago the witches turned you into a mouse. Then they did it to me." "You're lying," he cried. "I'm not a mouse." "If you hadn't been so busy guzzling that sandwich," I said, "you would have probably noticed your hairy paws. Take a look at them." Bruno looked down at his paws. He jumped. "Good grief!" he cried. "I am a mouse. You wait till my father hears about this. He may think it's an improvement," I said. Gonna have to stop there. Thank you very much for joining on another episode of Storytime with Mrs. Edwards and the Witches, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.